Hey, Mommy, where are we going?
We're going to see your grandmother and your aunt.
Uh-huh.
And Clinton, the dog.
Right. Which aunt?
On Sunday. She's going to be back. Wait to take this later. There's a certain view once you get like one block before.
Okay. Good.
And so is his brother Joey.
Yeah.
On to the right.
Oh, what's special about
With
that
the
house?
red flag. That was the house that she changed every window.
Which, the white one here?
This,
The white one?
yeah.
Oh, okay. So...
Grandma built without a front door. To the left. Right here.
A house with no front door.
Yeah, here's the front door.
Okay. Okay.
They built that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, the snow.
I got chicken bones today, you know, there's a bunch of chicken bones. And that's when I made a pot of soup, figuring that you can all have soup.
So Sandy just got home?
About a half hour before you did.
So she didn't have a good time?
Yeah, she did, but she was sick. So she couldn't do very much.
She liked their house?
Yeah, she loved the house. She loved her, but she loved the house. Oh, really?
You want to put lipstick on?
No. Oh, is that why you told me to put lipstick on, so that I'm on the video? How about not doing that now and eating something?
Okay, I'll eat something. And then, can we go outside though, if we stop now?
Later.
Because it's nice light outside.
Later.
Okay. Okay.
Did you take her menagerie here?
There's the birds.
Sit down.
You don't have any makeup on either.
No.
It's on tape right now, so.
Jeff came back on Saturday night.
Oh.
So excited.
No, don't say.
I'm not saying.
Alright, you want me to turn it off?
Turn it off. So Saturday we ate home.
shouldn't be
He
taking
made the
gossip,
best dinner.
Andy.
He made the best dinner.
Andy?
So he said, so Friday night he gets groceries and he said, Ashley! I put,
So,
Okay.
Alright, so,
but she is a sweet girl.
Okay,
Alright.
She's more like Mark than like Jeff.
Who's more like Mark? She is.
because Jeffrey probably says what he thinks and Mark keeps it in. So she doesn't know what Mark is really like because he keeps it in, he would never offend her.
And you think Jeff might?
Yeah. Jeffrey says what Jeffrey wants to say.
Mark was supposed to come sleep over last night, but he didn't come.
I'm so taping all of this stuff, by the way.
I want to show you the videos. Well, you have to
Are you
interview
on
Grandma
now?
first.
Are you on? Talking to Grandma? Are you gonna ask her the questions?
Yeah, I'm going to. I want to get started. Very nice. Okay, this is Esther Bratkowsky. This is January 13th, 2002. and we're here in 315 Butler Street in Kingston. Hi, Grandma. So I just I'm in this. Let me see.
You see me?
Yeah. No, it's okay. I'll put it up here.
Okay.
So, I just wanted to talk to you about, where you came from and, where you grew up and how you grew up, and also about your family and where they came from, and what are your goals for the future and your hopes and everything. But anyway, let's just start out. Where were you born? Where were you born?
I was born in New York City,
Mm-hmm.
in Harlem.
In Harlem. Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
Do you know exactly where?
Uh-huh. East 102nd Street.
There's a hospital there.
It was near Fifth Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
It was east, it was on 2nd Avenue,
Mm-hmm.
near Fifth.
Okay. Great.
And of course I didn't know because I left New York when I was about 3.5 years old, and we moved to Pennsylvania.
Okay. Were your sisters and brother born yet? Or?
My sisters and brother were all born in Wilkes-Barre.
Okay. Why did your parents leave New York?
They left New York because at that time they had relatives that lived here in the northeastern part of Pennsylvania, in Wilkes-Barre, and they the relatives that they had decided that they should come here and go into a small business,
Oh, I see.
which they did.
Uh-huh. And
And
where had your parents come from before?
my mother came from Russia, and my father came from Russia. I think they came somewhere in small cities, small towns that were called shtetls in Russia.
Mm-hmm.
And they came from different areas, but they met each other in New York City.
I see. So
And they met and
did they emigrate with their families?
alone.
They
They
came
came
alone?
alone. My father came alone by himself, I guess, to avoid the pogroms that were being,
Uh-huh.
the raids on Jews in Russia.
Does he know
At
what
that
happened?
time.
Does he know what happened to his family?
Yes, he eventually came to a small town called Ashley and settled in a general grocery store, meat market.
So what happened to your father's family in the shtetl?
My father's family, my father eventually, after being in business for about 10 years, got together with a brother of his that also emigrated from Russia into Israel. His name was Saul Heller. And he eventually moved also to Wilkes-Barre, the Wilkes-Barre area, and opened up a small little grocery store. So between the two brothers, they sent for his mother and father, my grandmother and grandfather, and eventually sisters and brothers also came.
I see. So your uncle was in Israel for a short time, and your father.
He went to Israel from Russia, and from Israel he came to America.
Okay.
And he served in the Palestinian army at that time, the Israeli army at that time. And finally he moved to this area in Wilkes-Barre, in Ashley. And they thrived, and eventually my mother's family did not come here though.
They didn't come.
No, they didn't come. My grandmother was killed by the Germans in Russia at that time, and my grandfather died. I don't know how he died, but I know he was blind when he died. And then we all grew up in the small town of Ashley, and we were afforded all the advantages that most children at that time are not afforded, like music lessons and dancing lessons and piano lessons and singing lessons and drama lessons, and our parents wanted us to have all the better things in life and all the things that, and at that time was very difficult for parents to achieve unless they came from very wealthy families.
So your father
But they
worked
did
pretty
the
hard.
best they could for us. And we grew up and we all went to high school. We all graduated from high school. And at that time, college was not a necessity for us to go to. fact, what we got in high school at that time, I graduated in 1934, and at that time, whatever education I got was comparable to a college education, because the teachers were excellent at that time. And of course, we had a nice social life in a small town. We made friends. We had relatives that lived here. And we had a very nice life in a small area.
So you were the eldest daughter.
I was the oldest daughter, and I was the one that, being the first American child in the family, I was the one that they looked up to and expected more from than maybe the other children.
Yeah. And what were your friends like around town? I mean, were there other immigrant families here? You said your father had some family here, and
yes, we did. He had uncles and aunts and cousins, a lot of cousins. There was a very tremendous amount of family that were in this area at that time. There were the Hellers and the Rifkins and the Gordons. And there was a very big family, and they were all very close, because on Sunday was a day when we would go visiting to all these relatives, or else they came visiting to us. It was very nice.
Besides Yiddish, what languages did they speak?
They spoke Russian and Polish.
Russian and Polish.
And helping in a general small store, where most of the customers there were either Polish or Slovak or Russian, I had to learn to wait on the customers in the store. I had to learn to speak a little Polish, which I still retain.
That's great.
Not Russian so much as Polish.
Yeah, there are a lot of Polish immigrants
A lot
here.
of Polish people in this area.
And okay. And so.
And eventually, I graduated from high school when I was 17, and worked in my father's stores. And my father had, at that time, Prohibition was repealed, and he opened up when I was 16 or 17, home was, which most people, Jewish people, didn't do at that time, but he did. And he really thrived. But I don't think he was meant to be a bartender or a
beer meister
or anything like that. But we all enjoyed it. He didn't let us in the beer garden,
Oh, he didn't?
except
Oh,
on paydays when the mines would. Of course, they were all miners, and they would all
so
buy
much business that you had to
groceries and drinks on credit. So they would come on paydays and pay up their credit bills. And that's when they allowed me to stay behind the register in the beer garden.
Oh, okay. So were the people serving beer at the in the beer garden?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, and so there were benches or tables. And...
Oh, beautiful. It was a beautiful beer garden. It was a real large beer garden with tables and chairs and food and everything. And on Saturday nights, my mother would cook. My mother would make chicken dinners for everybody at 50 cents a chicken dinner. And it was delicious. It was kosher chickens.
Oh, kosher chickens. But a lot of the people weren't Jews, right? They were.
No, but they enjoyed the dinners. They enjoyed the kosher dinners on Saturday nights. And we always had an orchestra come in on Saturday nights to play. And there was dancing. It was nice.
Did your brother play the fiddle at the time?
At the time he was taking lessons. He was very young. He's younger than me because I was the oldest one. I don't know what else I can tell you about it.
That's
Eventually I met my husband.
Where did you meet him?
He was from New York. He worked for a cousin of mine that had a coat factory in New York City. And my cousin decided that this would be a very good young man for me to meet because he was very ambitious and very, very nice, and he felt that his cousin should have a nice husband. So he introduced me, and we met, got married, moved to New York.
That was quick. But, so, which cousin was this that introduced you?
His name was Philip Heller, and he was the
That was-
owner
is that your
of
uncle's son?
he was the owner of a coat factory at I remember where it was, 250 West 39th Street
Oh, okay.
in New York City.
And that's where Grandpa was working.
And that's where your grandfather
Yeah.
was working at that time.
Yeah.
And his father was also working there as an operator. And your grandfather was a cutter, which was in very high esteem at that time. Somebody.
Right. Because you have to cut all the pieces right, because if you mess that up, then that's
Right, and you have to really,
Yeah, you remember, my father is in the same business, so I know what
Yeah,
cutter
yeah,
is. So,
your father came to the same business because
because
your grandfather suggested
Right.
that maybe he suggested
yeah.
to your grandfather that he would like to do
it's
that.
not a coincidence, right? So you met him in New York, and then how long did it take you to figure out that it was okay for you to like this guy?
Then he came with his father,
He
the
came-
cousin. He
he
came
came to
here to
Ashley?
Wilkes-Barre, and they met. And then his mother and father invited me to come to New York to meet them and have dinner for me. And eventually, it didn't take long. I think we knew each other like 3 or 4 months.
Wow.
And he decided that he wanted to get married. I said yes. I was 19 years old.
How old was he? He was
was
late 20s.
23.
Oh, early 20s, 23.
He was young too.
Uh-huh.
And we lived in New York, but not New York City. We lived in Canarsie, which is a suburb of New York City.
Brooklyn.
Right? And there I had my oldest daughter, Sharon, who eventually passed away, cancer. And but my father insisted that we should come back to this area, to Ashley, or to Wilkes-Barre, and whatever he thought my husband knew, he would help him get started in the business, which he did.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how we remained in this area. And then eventually, your mother, Susan, was born, but in New York. She was born in New York. Susan was born in New York. And Sandy was born in, the youngest daughter, Sandy, was born in Pennsylvania, in Ashley, Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
And they grew up
My mother was born in Bronx, right?
in the Bronx in New York.
Had you moved from Canarsie to Bronx?
Yes, we did, because your grandfather had an allergy near the ocean there. I don't know. He had some sort of an allergy, and the doctors felt that it would be better for him to move to a place like in the city.
That's really
away
funny. They asked him to get out of Canarsie.
from- So we got out of Canarsie,
I think he was allergic to eating crab or something like that. So maybe
and he was allergic.
maybe
he
he couldn't help himself from eating the crabs if he was living by the seashore. I don't know.
well, he was allergic to it. He really had a lot of allergies.
And every day he commuted into the city to do
Every
his work?
every day took a subway into the city. Every day. And they didn't think anything of going for an hour on the subway to work. you
Right.
know.
All right. And so what year was it when you moved to Pennsylvania?
To Pennsylvania.
Right after the war, huh?
Yeah, it was exactly 1944. Your mother Susan, was 3 months old, and we moved to Pennsylvania.
Okay. Did the war affect you in any way? Did it affect your business, or how was
No,
what
your
was life like?
grandfather was at that time 3F or 4F. I guess that's what it was, 4F.
Right.
Because he was wearing glasses, and he wasn't, his eyes seemed to be all right, but he wore glasses, and he had flat feet, and at that time, and his number that came up was very
Lower.
Very low, yeah.
Yeah.
And so he wasn't in the Army at all.
Good.
But he was an air warden while we lived in New York. He was an air warden at that time. And we had lots of...
And your brother? What about your brother Ralph?
I have a brother, Ralph, who was next to me in line, and two other sisters. I have a sister Shirley and a sister Ruth. And they all live in this area. We're all here except my brother Ralph moved to Scottsdale, Arizona. And they all thrived and had children, did very well.
And you were the first in your family to get married.
Yes.
And then Ralph married Jean after.
Then Ralph married. And then Shirley married. Shirley met Sidney was a local young man too, and she met him, and he went into the Army, and then she followed him when she was about 17 or 18 into Oklahoma. That's where he was stationed.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, and they got married in Oklahoma.
Was that okay with your parents?
It was fine as long as that's what they both wanted, because he was a very nice young man.
And Ruthie?
And Ruthie married a young man that she met socially on vacation one time, and he also moved back to Wilkes-Barre because my father, her father, wanted him, all his children, to be near him, and that's what, and he felt that they could succeed in whatever they're doing, being here. Which they did, very nicely.
Where was Larry from?
Larry was from New York too.
So your parents sort of brought made sure all of the children stayed around them and
Yeah,
taught their
and this
husbands.
is what their whole life was their children, and what their children and their grandchildren. And of course, then they saw, some of them saw great grandchildren too. So they had a wonderful life together. I mean, it was a good life. It wasn't harassed like being in a large city. It was, they were able to do things that people in large cities couldn't do.
Yeah. So when tell me again about the early part when you were growing up. Times were tough, even when you
very tough.
Even before you moved.
Most people at that time were in WPA. I don't know what that stood for. A help from the government of some kind, and the wages were very, very low. And most people had very, very little, and were able to give their children very little. But everyone worked, and everyone seemed to thrive. Oh, I'm very cold.
Oh, yeah? So we go inside?
Yeah.
It's good that we're sitting outside, though, because the light is so good. But...
I know, but I'm cold.
Okay, want to go inside?
Huh?
Okay. Well, we can get a light and do more inside.
Okay.
Anyways. See? It was took a photo? No? You don't like it?
Yeah.
What? It took a... Grandma does not look happy. Okay, we're rolling. All right.
Oh, he's.
Okay, so here we are again. It's still Sunday, the 13th of January, 2002, and here
Talk
there's.
loudly, because I don't hear you.
Who is that beast there on the sofa?
Clinton. He smells. No, he doesn't.
What is it?
He's perfume on.
Honest to God,
What?
I'm getting an allergy attack.
No, it's all wipes.
What?
Hi, Andy. I just came back from visiting in Atlanta.
You look nice, Andy.
A little better. I was very sick, but it's
know.
nice to be home back in a warm home, and I had a wonderful time. But it's always good to get home.
Good. Well, welcome back, Aunt Sandy.
Thank you, Andy.
Yeah, it's good to have you back. And so, earlier today we were talking about Grandma's early life. You know, when she first moved to Wilkes-Barre, and then she grew up here, and her brother and sisters, and how she met Grandpa. Do either of you have anything to add like that? Did Marie ever tell you anything about that?
Well, I think Grandma's leaving something out.
Uh-huh.
Before she met Grandpa, there was another man that was enamored by her.
Oh, I always thought that was a joke.
And gave her a big, big diamond watch.
Well, I was going to ask you about that, but I always thought that you were pulling my leg about that.
No,
that
it's true.
That was real?
That was true.
Oh, okay.
He was a very, very nice young man.
But she thought he was too nice.
Too young and too nice.
And she liked a little humor.
He wasn't humorous enough for me.
Uh-huh.
But he was a very fine young man, and he also lived in New York.
But I have to add something, but he did not have a sense of humor, and that's what she really,
And
most
that's
of
what
all,
I
that
thought
was the
I
number
would have all my
one
life
attribute that she
with your
found in
grandfather.
That's what you were
her,
looking for the most?
Is a good sense of humor,
where she could laugh. all
and
the time.
I would be able to laugh all my life. Didn't work out that way, but
She laughed a lot.
I laughed.
All right, just a little bit more about that gentleman caller. I mean, was he a local boy?
The other young man?
Yes.
Yeah, that was before your grandfather.
His name was Irving.
No, it was not. It was Saul.
Saul.
Saul?
Saul. It was Saul. He was very young at that time.
What's his last
About
name?
a year or two older than me.
Mhm.
And he was a very, very nice, young, sweet man
No.
that liked to play with my brothers and sisters rather than with me. So he was too youthful for me. At 17, I was all grown up and ready to
You were looking
face
for...
the world.
She wanted a New Yorker.
Uh-huh.
She thought my father was cosmopolitan.
Maybe he was. Was he?
He knew an awful
No,
lot
he-
about a lot of things that she herself was not aware of.
Mm-hmm.
He had interests in many, many things. He rode a motorcycle. He liked interested in birds and flying.
He flew a, not a plane, a glider
He flew
when
a
he was
glider.
very young.
So he
Yeah.
And very few people did that at that time. He did fly a glider.
Right, I remember him telling me.
So he had a lot of varied interests, which were very unlike a small town girl.
Okay, Clinton, go back to your mommy.
Clinton, come here.
Come on,
Come here.
go back, please.
Oh!
Okay.
Come here.
Yeah, so,
Hold on.
and how did you feel about his family?
How did I feel about his family?
Yeah.
Well,
Speak about his father, please.
father was a very handsome, very good-looking man. And very,
The water.
and he also was the chairman in his in the factory where he worked. He was the chairman of all of the labor, and he was very interested in unions and labor at that time. And he was strictly a union man at that particular time. He would work for all of the other people that worked in the factory.
And Grandpa at that time loved to travel, and that many people didn't do at that time.
That's right, he did. He would leave home for short periods of time, go to California.
He was
And,
a lot like you, Andy,
Mm-hmm.
and you were named after him.
Yeah.
That's true. His
I
name
am?
was Alcona.
Oh, okay.
Alcona.
Yeah. So he traveled a lot, and he had a lot of varied interests, and so that you thought that was pretty sexy, the fact that he was sort
He
of...
was a little bit different.
He
Yeah.
was different.
Uh-huh.
And my mother-in-law was a very, very, very bright lady, but she was not well. She was sick.
Uh-huh.
And so they found it very difficult to do. She found it difficult to do the things that she ever wanted to do in her life.
She knitted.
But she was very, very
Domestic things.
domestic. Yeah, she knitted very well and she sewed very well. And
And she was very proud of her boys and her daughter, so be it.
and my husband Murray, your grandfather, had a brother, an older brother, and a younger sister. And in fact, the older brother, at 90, just passed away
Mhm.
this year.
Hyman. Yeah. Did you get on well with the with Hyman and his
Got
sister?
along with everyone.
Yeah.
I knew how to do that, even though it might have been sometimes impossible to do it, but I did it, and they respected and loved me, as far as I know.
And so, was Grandpa close to his family while he was, married to you?
Always close, always very close.
Well, Andy, what I remembered was his family was very much different than my mother's family. They were a little reclusive, and they didn't have to travel together when they would come to people's.
Their lifestyle was different than
Totally
ours.
different.
Totally different than my mother and father's lifestyle.
They weren't as open as your family was.
Exactly. Everything was private and had germs. So when they came
Private
with
and had
their own
germs.
food and their own cider, and they were just a little awkward and different. So
How would they
Their
just?
lifestyle was different than ours. We were business people and they were workers, and that was the difference.
But besides that,
How do you think they would describe your family?
they thought we were. They probably thought we had more than they did.
Yeah, they did.
But probably we didn't. It was just that in a smaller town, you could do a lot more with a lot less.
Okay.
But they were more of an intellectual type. They loved to read, they loved to go to libraries, they loved to go to planetariums. And when they traveled, they never stayed in hotels. They would always stay at
People's
families' homes. So that was very different than
Well, most
how-
people did that in those days anyway. Most people, when they went to visit, they didn't go to visit just to visit. They stayed in people's homes, and they could have been visitors for a week or two, and everyone received them beautifully. But it's not the way it is today. Today, if you go out of town, you go to a hotel and you stay there, and people visit you or you meet with each other.
Right.
That's the way it happens. Where's Sandy? Is that good candy?
Very good. Thanks, Sandy, for providing the refreshment. She's got these really nice chocolates.
Ooh, what, Mom? He's gonna eat it.
Don't let that dog eat my chocolates. They're mine.
Put the dog in the bathroom now.
He's very pleased.
Yeah, with the parakeets.
He's cleaner than
Lovers.
anybody. And I'll scratch the door. He's clean. Honest.
Okay.
Mom, you know I cleaned him.
Okay,
all
well,
kinds
Andy,
of
why don't you go back to interviewing?
All right. So we're recording now. And so I want to explore a little bit more about the working life of the Jewish family in northeastern Pennsylvania. What was it like every day when you were here and Grandpa went off to work in his factories? Where did he work, or what factories did he have, or where were they?
We
What was
had a
that?
factory on Pennsylvania Avenue.
No, but prior to that,
Okay.
he had one in Ashley, and it was Charles Manufacturing, and
Named after Sharon and Arlene. And your name was going to be Arlene, but it was changed to Susan.
And at that time, he was pretty young to have his own factory, and at that time unions were pretty big in this area.
They had
And
just started to come in, and so they were making examples of all the people that were here. And even though they wanted to
do you
make
mean?
sure that their employees were making more money than they ever had before, it would take some of it away from the employer that was running the factory, because they would come every day and bother them to give more and more and more. The unions were very strong at that time.
so at that time, my mother always made a very big dinner at night. I mean, we were a very big
Meat
did
eaters.
You were
meat
big people?
eaters. Big meat
Meat
eaters.
and potatoes.
Meat, potatoes, vegetables.
And gravy.
She made a full dinner every night. And then my father would walk in and she would have us keep quiet until he would relax for a few minutes.
Which was an
Because-
impossibility.
Because he would go back to work at 7 o'clock for the second
Night shift.
For the night shift.
Oh, I see.
But you try keeping 3 daughters quiet. It's an impossibility.
Why did he want you to be quiet?
Because he needed time to rest, to
Because
relax,
at
to
that time
rejuvenate.
he had
Didn't want noise at the dinner
He
table.
was working with 120 girls during the day. He had to come home to 4 more girls. It was a little difficult. So
So was the factory near here?
the first factory was in Ashley, which was about, I guess,
Which
15,
was where
20,
my father lived.
You weren't living here, obviously. This was...
15, 20 minutes away. We lived in Wilkes-Barre.
Come over here.
We lived in the first apartment in Wilkes-Barre, which I
Here,
remember
Clinton.
my father and mother discussing. Their rent was $42.50 a week.
A month.
A month, I'm sorry. $42.50 a month. But then my mother heard from one of the neighbors that lived down the street that there was an apartment across the street for $77.50, which was a much more elegant kind of house and would give us all much more space. So every night I remember my mother and father sitting in the kitchen deciding whether they could afford the $77.50 a month.
I don't remember that.
And
But we had a party line, so that was
and she would hear that was the best deal that would be, but we'd be on the corner right next to the railroad tracks. And my father had a fear that it would be too much noise to listen to the railroad tracks. However, that was our next move. And at that year also, my father was getting pretty successful because he bought a 1950 Dodge.
a blue dye.
Well, actually, the first Dodge was a white Dodge, and in 1951 he bought another Dodge, 1951,
A Dodge?
from 50 to 51. So it was like 2 years in a row to
So
get a
you
new
know we made
car.
it.
He wanted everybody to know on Maffett Street that we made it, obviously, that every year to get a new car was highly unusual. And I think the car cost $3,600 at that time.
I disagree. I think he did it for himself. My father was not the type of person
Wouldn't show off.
to
He
show.
never cared.
It was the exact opposite.
never
did
wanted
it for
a
his
Cadillac
wife.
either.
He did it for Mrs. Bratkowsky. He never wanted the people to know that he was doing well. So that part I think is a little wrong. But everything else is right. The Dodge was
He
right.
was happy with his life eventually.
Yeah, but he was a very
That he-
private person.
That he did more than
He
the
never
rest of
wanted
his
to
family
show
did.
how much he made.
But he was very, very proud of his success and the fact that he could afford a $77 apartment a month plus a new car to boot. I mean, that was a big deal. And then about a year later, he told her that we should start looking in Kingston to buy or build our own house.
Why did he want to move to Kingston, away from Ashley?
It was residential.
Well, because it was way more residential and the schools were supposedly better. And at that time, more Jewish people were moving into Kingston. Certain streets were desirable and certain streets were undesirable. So street names were very, very important. So every Sunday after breakfast,
Come here, Clint.
we would go shopping for new homes and looking at new homes.
Is this true, Grandma?
Every Sunday.
What'd you do with it? You better not.
Did you want to move to Kingston?
Yes, I did.
Why?
Because it would be better for my children.
Uh-huh.
They would have more advantages in Kingston than they would in any of the other areas that we lived in. The school system was much better in Kingston. And
What were your children like? Were there any aptitudes or weaknesses that concerned you or made you happy?
my daughter Sharon was a good student, and she enjoyed school, and they enjoyed. She had an outgoing personality, and she got along with everyone. And then my daughter Susan
Settle down.
was the artistic one. And she was very, very popular in school. Everybody loved her. And then Sandy, the youngest one, was also very popular in school, and everyone loved her too. So we had a very good life. Everybody was being admired and loved.
So our house was
Like
Always an open house.
always an open
Always
house.
with lots of people coming
And
in.
lots of food.
people would all my friends would come in the side door. My father would be upstairs eating an apple and watching Groucho Marx. And my mother was playing poker with her mafioso friends. And Piercy and all my friends would come in and raid the refrigerator. And nobody ever knew who was in the refrigerator, who wasn't. Our house was a regular fraternity sorority house.
So there were a lot of people coming in and out.
Constantly.
And then we also built a house in Harvey's Lake, which was a nearby lake, about 9 miles around. It was a beautiful lake. And we had some old French doors that my husband had got. I don't know where he got it from, maybe from Canarsie. And he had it in the basement. He thought, well, that was the beginning to build a beautiful cottage at Harvey's Lake, which he did.
This was just a little summer home for you,
It wasn't a little summer home, it became a big summer home.
but you kept the house in Kingston.
Uh-huh.
Oh,
This was just a summer home though.
yeah.
So
But
instead
it
of
became,
getting
and there we had people galore coming all the time.
so instead of getting a legitimate builder to build this house,
He had Joe
We got a
he
friend.
got a bar guy
He was good though, when he wasn't drunk.
when he wasn't drunk. So
And
we'd
he
have
would-
to sober him up
Sure,
and pay him
sure.
$5 a day.
To build. And he built this very, very nice house which we planned.
On a lot of acres.
And a lot.
It's like green acres.
What?
And around it was a creek. It was very
So-
nice. Have you ever been there, Andy?
Harvey's Lake?
Yeah.
Sure, I have.
Did you see the house?
Yeah, I saw where it was.
It was a very
yeah.
nice house at one time.
Uh-huh. Yeah, wasn't there a story where Sandy like fell in a well or something when she
That
was
was a
trying?
different house.
That was a different
Oh.
house in Harvey's Lake before we built this house.
Yeah.
She
She-
fell into the outhouse.
Fell into that house. Oh.
She didn't fall all the way in. She fell part way
We
in.
had a creek,
Skinny, that explains it.
and I was trying to jump the creek to go to Bread and Spear Garden for French fries, which was right next door to our cottage. And my little legs wouldn't carry me, so I fell into the creeks, the outhouses, you name it. And my mother's father, Ben, instead of taking me right out, he got a tape measure to see how far down I was. And everybody tells that story about how Sandy almost lost her life
Yeah.
In an
in an
outhouse.
outhouse.
Yeah. What if you had these? You had some fairly influential or powerful people that you used to socialize with, but at the same time you had all these union troubles. I mean, couldn't you know? Why did Grandpa have so many problems resolving these?
The union was just coming into northeastern part of Pennsylvania at that time when we started business. And they wanted to make examples of all of the owners of all of the
Small
factories that they opened. And so they pushed them to the nth degree. Even though a lot of the larger factories did very well, the smaller factories found it very difficult, but they were also, they did well too, with being pushed.
Andy, at the
But they were harassed all the time.
Andy, at the same time, Grandma and Grandpa had a great social life. They were friendly with people called the Sperrys, and they would make plans to travel to Florida.
We did.
And they did things that their parents had never done before. So it gave them a lot of different kinds of
American kind of life.
American kind of social life that they never had. Every Saturday night there was,
The movies and dinner, out to dinner.
and with friends, and people would come in, and and then in the summertime they would invite these same kind of people to our house at the lake, and my mother would grill on the grill, and we would have like 35, 40 people every Sunday, and never thinking of. People would not bring food. My mother would cook it all.
Stop it.
And it was a really nice life, as I remember. Very, very social for all of us.
Mhm.
And then that's where we
It was a
started.
much better life in a smaller community than it would have been in New York City.
There was a lot of interaction with cousins, friends, cousins of cousins, and it wasn't like everybody's cousin was our cousin too.
Yeah. So, Grandma, again, Secretary. So anyway, we're talking about your daughters growing up, and can you tell me a little bit about what were your concerns for them and your hopes?
Well, my hopes for them were that they should grow to be beautiful, successful, and have all had college educations, which they did.
Okay.
I made sure that they did things that I didn't have.
Which was a college
we afforded
education?
them all of the privileges that we had plus.
I see. So they
And, we all worked very hard for that.
and
They grew up to be wonderful women. Wonderful.
Come here, Clint.
what was your who were your biggest role models in life? Who did you look to as far as an example of the kind of lifestyle that you wanted, how to raise your children? I mean, you were the eldest of your siblings.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, which of your friends were most important in giving you guidance? In giving you guidance.
I had my grandmother's sister. Her name was Esther Isaacs. And she was a beautiful, very smart-looking woman that also came from Russia at that time. But very wealthy and very successful and very smart. And she was like the queen of the family. And we all looked up to her.
And so what did she do that you admired?
Well, she was gracious. She was a gracious hostess, and she was a very bright lady.
Beautiful things in her house.
And had,
Beautiful
oh yes,
silver.
her furnishing and her silver and all of the things that she owned and had were something. And she also was a woman that traveled extensively at that time to different countries when no one else did that. But she and her husband were able to do that. They were very successful.
You said she was your grandmother's generation, your
My
grandmother's sister?
grandmother's sister.
But she came from Russia at the same time?
They are the ones that suggested that we come from New York. That my mother and father come from New York to this area, northeastern part of Pennsylvania.
Oh, they were already here.
They were already here, and they're the ones that suggested that we come here. And they were already in business. They were in the beauty supply business at that time. And they were very, very successful. And they really were traveled. They traveled to Germany and to England and to France and to Russia, which very few people did in those days.
And they had a summer home, which was quite
And they had a
different than
summer
ours.
home, which was also at Harvey's Lake, but it was with tennis courts and swimming pools, and nobody had
show
those
homes.
things. It was show places. And
A
of
show
course,
home
we all looked up to them. They were role models.
I see. So it was really her style and
Her lifestyle that we were trying to imitate. All our lives, that's true. We did.
Did my grandfather also look up to their family?
Yeah, we all did. Yes, he did.
Oh, your sisters and brother also?
Everybody did.
Interesting.
And cousins.
And cousins. We all looked up to them as role models of what life should be like.
In America.
In America, right. 'Cause don't forget, I was the first
Generation.
child
Yeah.
of American child of Russian parents. Russian-born parents. They became citizens soon after. I mean, they arrived. They became American citizens. That was their first venture. The first thing they wanted to do was to be an American citizen,
Right.
which they did.
Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit about what you know about the way that Murray grew up in New York and what his lifestyle was like?
It was different than our lifestyle. They were actually not ever in business, ever. They were working, and when you work for a living, you live a different kind of lifestyle than when you are in your own business. And you are able to afford many more things when you have your own business than when you are working for someone. And in those days, the salaries weren't as great as they are today if you're working for someone. So their lifestyle was entirely different. They lived entirely different than we do. I can't even explain it. Their whole lifestyle was different.
Actually, my father felt that if you got a civil service degree or test or whatever, and a job,
My mother-in-law felt that way. That was what was the most important thing in life, is to get work for the government, because then you were sure of a steady lifestyle salary, a lifetime salary.
with all the fringe benefits.
With all the fringe benefits that you would get after you would retire.
Mm-hmm. I can edit this later.
Come here.
Okay, and tell me a little bit more about how you as you started as Grandpa started getting towards retirement age, and then there was a flood, and how did that affect things? Did that?
We had a lot of things happen.
I know financially that was a burden, but did it
It was
emotionally?
a burden, but we lived through it all because we weren't the only ones. All our friends were in the same boat. Actually, the same boat. We were flooded here.
Oh.
We had the
It's a good
flood
time.
called Agnes
Uh-huh.
in 1972, and we lost our home. The water went over the top of the roofs of our homes, and we were all seeking different places to live for a time. And some of us couldn't get back into our homes because they were not able to be repaired enough. But we were fortunate. And at that time, the government was lending money at 1% to get rehabilitated again.
Mm-hmm.
But once again,
And-
it brought people together, and this whole community came together.
And nobody really actually died because of it, because everyone was in the same boat, and we all had the same problems. And it gave us a little bit more friendship with each other, a little more comradeship, because we all had the same problems.
Mm-hmm.
So from there on in, it took a while, and we went back into business a little bit. Not for very long, but we did. And we rebuilt our home again, the best way we could, at the 1% interest
And then moved to
for
Florida.
the government. And we also went to Florida, and we bought a building in Florida.
Mm-hmm. Had you hoped to move to Florida before that?
Actually, I don't know if I ever thought about it. I know we went to visit in Florida and thought it was very beautiful. And then we thought maybe after the flood in Wyoming Valley here, this is the Wyoming Valley, that we would retire and move to Florida altogether. So that's why we went to look for something lucrative that we could possibly make a living at in Florida. So we bought a building with some of the money that was lent to us at 1%, and bought this 21 apartment building in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
And it seemed to work out very well.
That made Daddy really the happiest he had ever been in his life.
Yes, he was very happy there. He loved it.
He liked being a landlord.
And he was very
Proud.
capable of doing small things like repairs and taking care of the place himself until he got very sick and he passed away.
Yeah.
He loved living on the water.
And he loved living. We
having
were
a
on
boat.
the water and having a boat.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember he used to enjoy repairing things in people's place. That was in people's apartments. That was a good part of his day, where he would go around and figure out what things he could do and what things he needed.
Yeah,
he
make them
needed
more
to get-
comfortable.
Yeah.
And they were actually furnished apartments, all furnished completely, but so people were able to move right in and just live there. There
Yeah.
were 21 apartments, and it was a good deal.
Well, I didn't realize they were all furnished.
Excuse me?
I didn't know that they were all furnished. They were all
They were
furnished.
all furnished when yes.
Oh.
Eventually, then, when things became more expensive and we stopped furnishing them and just sold and just rented them unfurnished.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah,
We
he-
were there from 1972 until 1993, right?
72 to 93. Yeah.
1972, 73. From 1973 until 1993, which was 20 years.
Uh-huh. Okay.
But that was a time where I think my father was most happy.
He was very happy there. He loved it. It was a wonderful place to be.
Mm-hmm. And your sister Ruthie still spends a lot of time in Florida.
Yeah, they eventually bought in
Palm Beach.
Palm Beach. They bought an apartment
Mm-hmm.
in Palm Beach, which they are still using now. My sister Shirley also bought in
Boynton Beach.
Boynton Beach, right.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay.
So they all sort of navigated for vacations in the winter to Florida.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so what are your hopes for the future for yourself and for your daughters?
Well, my hopes, I've seen a lot of my hopes come true. My 2 grandsons are doctors, which is a wonderful
And the
thing,
other
lots
grandson?
of education.
And the other grandson?
And the other grandson is a lawyer.
Mhm.
So I am very happy about that. And I have one granddaughter who has 4 babies, and she's very young, and her husband's also a lawyer,
Mhm.
and she's a mother of 4 babies, 4 children.
Yeah.
So I'm very happy with that.
Mm-hmm.
I've had lots of tragedy in my life, which I've tried to bear with and to try to be as whole as I can possibly be for my other children and my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren. I've tried very hard.
Okay. Let me take a step backwards. When I was a little boy, you used to take me always to Percy Brown's, and it was
Oh,
this
yeah.
cafeteria, which I thought at the time it had pretty good food, but later on
They
I guess
did.
my tastes changed a little bit. But
They had
But-
a cafeteria style.
they had cafeteria style food. Those little coffees with those sort of like light bulb shaped upside down, light bulb shaped little coffee decanters with the black ribbing plastic thing on the side.
They're decanters with the coffee.
Right, that kind of thing, and then
It was
pudding
very unique
dishes.
and it was very famous.
But famous, it was one of the best
Famous. It
cafeterias.
was called Percy Brown's Cafeteria.
And when I would go there with you, you'd always introduce me to all your friends, and they would grimace at me and
we
squeeze
would
my.
meet there almost every day for either lunch or dinner.
When did you start meeting there?
Well, it was actually like a meeting place. We would do this almost every day. We would all have lunch together.
You and your friends?
With my friends.
And did they have a kind of similar background as you?
They all sort of were in business at one time. Yeah,
I mean, had
pretty
their
much the same.
parents emigrated from
Their
Russia,
parents
Poland?
also emigrated
Mhm.
from different countries. Some from Austria, Hungary. Some from Germany. Some from.
Many transplants from New York that came into Wilkes-Barre.
And they all were originally in New York in the beginning.
Mhm.
And from New York, they all migrated here.
Oh, I see. So that's pretty much the common theme.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. And
Which happened in a lot of, from New York. When they landed in New York and Ellis Island, they stayed in New York for a little while, and then they all emigrated to different parts of the United States,
Mhm.
different cities.
Yeah. And when did you start meeting them there at Percy Brown's? When did that become such an important part of your life? What year
Well,
was
it was a
that?
very good place for food. Their
Was that
food
in
was excellent.
Was that in the 70s when that started?
It was before the 70s. It was in the 60s, in the early 60s.
Uh-huh.
Percy Brown's was the place where everyone would meet. And if you came in from out of town, an out-of-towner would come. They would also be at Percy Brown's for dinner.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I see.
And then we had a very beautiful hotel here. It was called the Hotel Sterling, which eventually is now in ruins, but it was...
That's near the bridge over there, right?
Yeah, right,
I've
near
seen
the
it, yeah.
bridge.
Uh-huh.
But eventually, it is now in ruins and they don't know what to do with it. But at one time, it was a place for people to come from, that came from out of town.
Mm-hmm.
It was for weddings and festive affairs, and it was very beautiful. At one time, it had a lot of fine paintings and a lot of wonderful furnishings that you didn't see around here.
Oh, I see. So that was kind of an important cultural center.
Right.
And
Sandy, what can you...
Now, where did you leave off?
well,
Percy.
I wanted to get into some of Grandma's friends and talk about some of those women. And
Well, they were called the firing squad. Did you
That's
mention
what-
that?
That's what my husband called them, the
And
firing squad,
In
because
order for my father to get attention, he'd have to go to Percy Brown's, and it had to be voted by 5 women whether they were going to let my father sit and join them for lunch. But my father was really a good sport. He never got upset that maybe he came after at second or third or after Sally Sobel or Betty Birnbaum or any of the firing squad. My mother really did. In those days, nobody ever needed a shrink because they had 12
other.
different women.
Opinions.
And they were strong opinions. I remember Susan and I would go to Percy Brown's, and I would order mashed potatoes and gravy, and then I thought, oh my goodness, now they're gonna talk about us for 25 minutes. But we usually passed the grade. We didn't do too many bad things.
yeah, yeah.
did the other women's children also have to go through the same thing?
Pretty much so.
Well, one of the women didn't allow her daughter to even
Who was that?
acknowledge that she
Oh.
had a daughter.
What?
Well, she was...
So we were fortunate that my mother was really good to us. In comparison, some of the women were not especially kind to their daughters.
No, they
I mean,
weren't.
at all.
Yeah, for example?
Well, like one of them would say, "Get out of here, you klutz." And she was a tall, gangly-looking girl. I mean, but she could have done more. She could have done less shopping at the Hollywood for herself.
Is that Betty Birnbaum, Sylvia
I refuse
Sokas,
to
or
answer
Sally
on the
Sobel?
grounds that might
That was
incriminate me.
Betty Birnbaum
Sylvia
and her
Sokas?
daughter.
No, Betty Birnbaum?
Yeah, and her
I
daughter,
refuse to answer.
she disowned her daughter eventually, anyway.
But my father did have good self-image. He was not afraid to sit down with a bunch of women.
Answer the phone.
Do you want to get it?
And
And
be
most of them
judged.
wouldn't be.
Ooh, very nice. Wait, let me try it again. Okay. That looks good.
Is that funny? Susan, look
That's the
at
way
your
Glenn's
nose.
looking at us.
Is that funny?
Glenn-
He'll get tangled now. He won't figure this one out.
He's really twisted. Clinton, are you?
You like little kids, like getting your attention.
Is he cute or what?
Look at the dog.
Where's
That to the dog.
Alright, that's pretty funny.
Okay.
Here, you do it. You do it.
Do it again, Amy.
Jackie Berman. Jackie Berman. He's good dancer. How do you do that? He's like a magician.
Stop growling.
Ooh, they're growling. Ooh.
He knows the dog.
I'll stop recording if you really want me to. You want me to stop
I
recording?
really want you.
Beg me to stop.
I
Please
beg
stop.
you, Andy,
I
to
beg you.
stop.
Why? Have you had enough?
Retired.
Yeah. Come on.
It's like a bar mitzvah when people are like
It's
asking you
enough.
to talk and you're like,
Mom,
I don't have anything
yeah,
else to say, but have a good wedding.
Mom,
You know, I had a lot of
do you
fun.
like
Thank
the
you. have
Andy, you were
good marriage.
wonderful, and you could come.
Andy, you're a good
Yes.
producer.
Let's talk about Andy for a little
And
while.
you go to
All we do is talk
Hollywood,
about
come up with
Murray,
this
Murray,
stuff.
Murray, Esther,
Talk
Esther.
about Andy now.
No,
Andy.
oh, I'm just kidding. I'm just
Andy.
joking.
Please go to Hollywood and become a producer. You do a very good job.
Yes, thank you.
Would you do that? Forget being a surgeon.
Yeah.
Okay.